All right. Okay, so I do mine a little differently. I do the intro and all of that afterwards. So when I'm
Yes.
editing, I just throw that in there. So we can just jump right into chit chatting and
Great.
talking. Yeah.
You're the host. I'm in your hands. I'll follow your
All
lead.
right. All right. All right. Well, hey, Jody.
Hey, Lindsay, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. Thank you so much for joining me. I had the pleasure of being on your podcast a little while ago, and I was like, I have to have
Yes, and
Jody. I
and
have to
I'm
have
a
Jody
huge
on.
fan of your podcast. I listen to it all
Thank
the
you.
time, and I love the social media content that you put out. It's like regular viewing for me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and that's how we met.
That's
That's
right.
how we
Yeah.
met with social media. I think I say that on every podcast. I'm like, hey, that's how we met. Like, because there's such an amazing community out there.
But you know what? It is the big connector, right? I mean, social
Yeah.
media is now nothing new. What are we like 15 years down the road with social media?
Yes.
It's still connect for all the awful stuff it has done,
Yeah. Yeah.
the documented awful things that social media has done to our society.
Yeah.
Um, it's still the big connector. It still can bring
Yes.
people together. And I have met so many people like you and others who I have real world relationships with now. The first time I
Yes.
interacted with them was through social media.
Yeah. I think a huge portion of my friends in my life at this moment were first introduced to me through social media.
Sure. That
It's
that makes
a
total sense.
and it's we are in a hybrid. I was just talking about this the other day that we are in a hybrid digital world now. It's not a separate thing anymore. It works together with real life. There's no separation. I don't think anymore. I mean, people are connecting, like you said, on social media. There, anytime we need anything, product, a service, information, a question, we're online. So
It's also the new, you're totally right. And it's also the new, let me make this analogy the right way.
yeah.
Like, remember when you were growing up and you would watch your favorite TV show, and then your second favorite TV show would follow that one on the same channel or the same network,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
at some point there was a crossover, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the cast from the two shows appeared on the same show in some way, shape, or
Right.
form. Have you ever seen that happen on social? You're like, oh, it's
Oh
him
yeah.
and her, and it's
That's so
right.
true. It is.
Everything that was on TV 20 and 30 years
Yeah.
ago is now on social media. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting to think about. Yeah.
I
I
see
and I
so
think
many
it's
crossovers. Oh my gosh.
yeah. Oh, that's funny. That is funny. Yeah, I also am lately have been seeing a lot of videos where people are talking to their kids and saying like, yeah, like we couldn't watch stuff just on demand. And they're like, what do you mean? They don't have the like no, media was just it was what yeah, it was whatever was out there is what you consumed and you couldn't get anything that wasn't being brought to you. Now, with online we can search and do whatever we want and find whatever we want and I think it's amazing. I talk about it like it's something new. It's not.
Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, right? I mean,
It is and
there's,
isn't, yeah.
there's always something new that's happening. I actually just dialed back all of my streaming subscriptions to the ad supported just because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't
So
spend
many. Yeah.
all this money on all these streaming services, but I didn't want to let
Yep.
any of them go. So I
Right.
just pushed them all back. And I got to tell you, when you're watching a TV show on name your streaming platform and a commercial hits, this Gen X kid is like, oh, great, I got 2 minutes. And
Like
my
give you a little
son, who is
break.
14, is freaking out, like, what's with the commercials? I'm like, no, this is great. Go
You're
to the
like
bathroom, get a
nostalgia.
snack, be back in two.
Right. That is so true. Oh man. So I want to talk about too. So obviously I'm in marketing, you're in PR. There's a lot
Yeah.
of overlap there. So you talk about these collaborations and these, overlaps. I feel like with what you do and with what I do, there's a lot of overlap as well. So I'd love to get in and talk about first, I want to hear your story. I want to hear how you got into the field. And yeah, so let's just start there. How did you get into uh all of this?
So I've been doing PR, and when I talk about PR, it's primarily media relations, working with
Hmm.
reporters and getting news coverage for clients. But I got into it as a second career. My first career, the thing I wanted to be when I grew up, was a radio reporter. And I went
Oh,
to
you got the
college
voice for
at
that.
Oh, thank you. I
Yep,
went to
I
college
hear it.
at a school that had a radio station that I could walk into my first semester of my freshman year and potentially be on the air. And that's what I did. I spent more time over the course of 4 years, including a couple of summers, working at the radio station every day than I did in the classroom. I graduated, I say that I graduated from WFUV rather than from Fordham University. And so when I got out of college, I went to work at an old news radio station in New York City, bounced around a couple different other stations. I was a reporter that whole time because I had a demo tape the day I walked out of school.
Wow.
I was on the air within 6 months in New York City. I was on the air, as a radio reporter in New York City, which everyone told me I was going to have to move to Iowa or, wherever else you have to move to, small market, to get on the air,
Oh,
to get your break.
okay. See, I
I
would
was
think the
like, no,
opposite.
I'm staying in New York.
Yeah, I would think the
And so
opposite.
that's what I did for several years. Ended up at a station called WCBS Radio, which is an all news radio station in New York City. And I was working for them. And after about 4 years of that, I reached a point in my life where I looked at so here's the story.
Okay.
I'm getting a little tired of the treadmill of radio, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm shooting towards being the morning drive reporter on this station, which is like the top assignment that you can get in any broadcast business, right? If you're going to be on in morning drive. And I wanted to be in radio, never wanted to be in TV. I never wanted to be in front of a camera. I always liked the appeal of radio and storytelling with words and sound as opposed to pictures.
Yeah.
Radio reporters, I still think, are the best writers in the media business because they have to tell a complete story in about 2 sentences, in about 35 seconds. But I'm sitting doing a morning drive live shot on WCBS radio, and I'm parked behind a Dunkin' Donuts, staring at a dumpster with my coffee steaming up my windshield and the sun coming up, and projecting my life forward, saying, this is what I'm going to do for the next 40 years. Maybe not.
Not for me. Not for me. Right.
And so because I used to get called out, I used to with my beeper, and now I'm dating myself, Gen X. But dinner would get interrupted, weekends would get interrupted.
Yeah.
You have to go chasing stories. I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And I segued into PR. Well, ironically, now I probably work more in PR than I did when I was in radio, but I still enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I still get to work with all of the reporters who I worked with back then, which is really neat.
Yeah.
The people who I used to stand next to, holding a microphone at a press conference or running out, sharing stories in the field. And now I'm pitching them stories.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's like none of that experience was wasted. It's all, like you just said, you're still connected with those people. They still benefit you. The relationships are still there, for
And
your
I
business
still
now.
I had the training, and I think this is really important, and something that you can only learn in a newsroom is you learn how to think like a reporter. You understand what the reporter needs, what the editor needs, what the outlet, newspaper, radio, TV needs to do the story you're pitching them. And I think so many people who never had that newsroom training, and I'm not a unicorn. There are thousands of people, tens of thousands probably in the country, former reporters who are now doing public relations in some way, shape, or form. We all think like reporters. We all understand what they need in the pitch. And today, whether it's also the photo, the video, the social media handles, all the stuff you got to pack in the bag for them to say, yes, we can do that story. So thinking like a reporter is critical to being successful in public relations.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. It's seeing the whole picture,
100%.
And I think that's so crucial today, even with what I do. There's just so many moving parts today. I feel in so many different fields, especially with what we're just talking about, with, like you just said, social media handles, like that wouldn't have even existed, 15 years ago. Right. So it's like, there's so many extra elements today of communication and so many different channels now than I think there were before. That it's almost like you have to have a handle on what's going on everywhere because it all has to work together.
Yeah, for sure. And you also have to think like the reporter or like the outlet, and the social media handles I'll use as the example.
Yeah.
Um, a newspaper is going to write a story. Okay, great. It's going to be in print. Well, it's also going to be on their website. They're
Hmm.
also going to link to certain things. They're also going to, so you want to give them appropriate links to link to, right? If they choose to do that. You also want to give them your social media handles, because they're probably going to put this story on their social media channels. You don't want them to either not link to your social handle on a
Yeah.
particular platform, or link to the wrong one.
Oh,
Because
that,
as
yeah.
we all know, we've all tried to find somebody who maybe we're not connected with, and you punch that name in and it's like it's not coming up, and I don't know who this person is or where this person is.
Yeah.
And so the default position in a newsroom is, if I can't figure it out now, I'm not going to bother with it. And
Yeah.
that's not an indictment of what's going on in a newsroom. It's just that everything is moving so fast that
Hmm.
if it, they'd rather leave it out than take a chance that they're wrong,
Oh, yeah.
right? With
Yeah.
something like a social media handle. So you want to serve up those social media handles when you're giving them the information that they need to tell their story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And I like what you said, if it's not readily available, they just will leave it out, or they just won't use it. Or, and I feel like even on the consumer side of that, it's the same thing. If we have to dig too far or look too hard for something, we're not looking for it. We're moving on to the next thing. So it's so, like you said, everything's moving so fast. It's so crucial. It's so
It really
crucial.
is. Yeah.
I wanted to touch back too on, you said about all of your the journalism, and like being called out, in radio and covering the stories and being called out, during dinner and all of that. It's funny. It made me think, because when I was back in college, I actually studied journalism for a while as well, as part of my communication studies. And I thought for a little while that I was going to take that path. And for the reasons you just explained were the reasons I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want that kind of crazy schedule. Like, one part of me was like, that sounds really exciting and really fun. And then the other part of me was like, that's really unpredictable. And I don't know if I like that part of it. Right?
It is
And is that,
unpredictable, and in a
yeah,
way, and I'm not trying to say that journalists are the same here, but it's kind of like being a police officer or a firefighter or an EMT. Is you can't control your environment. In fact, your
right.
whole existence is reacting to your environment, reacting to
Yeah,
what's going on. And when they say breaking news, these breaking news stories happen. They're not scheduled.
right.
They're so
Right.
so if you're on a shift, or if you're nearing the end of your shift, or even if you're, I mean, let's use an extraordinary example, like some major thing happens and extra hands are called in. Um, you don't get to control your environment. You're volunteering for that job. You're volunteering for
Yeah.
surrendering a certain part of your life to the news cycle or the things that are happening out there, and you don't control them all the time.
Right, right. So I'm curious with what you just said there about you can't control it, but now with what you do now, like what are some of the things you can control in terms of helping people get out, into those, publications and all of that?
Sure. So what I do is work with my clients to, number one, identify their goals, their business goals. What do they want to achieve? And then two, identify the storylines that articulate that work.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
take the storylines and develop them into things that we can pitch to media, and we adjust them based on the medium, whether it's print or whether it's video or TV or radio,
Yeah.
magazine, online, you name it. Um, adjust those stories to fit those mediums and pair them up with the reporters that might be interested in writing them, and then get those stories reported in a way that has an aggregate effect of
Mm,
enhancing their brand, enhancing their reputation, elevating their visibility. Because what I always warn clients is that public relations and media coverage is not a direct line to your cash register, but
mhm.
it should put you on people's radar in a more focused way, that
Yeah.
encourages them to seek you out when they need you. It's similar to advertising in that way, except for
Hmm.
that it is not bought, right? Advertising is
Right.
paid for. You buy space, you put an ad out. Media relations and working with media outlets is what we call earned media. In other words, you roll up your sleeves and you earn it. You pitch a story, you get someone interested. The reporter does their own reporting and reports in their own way. You don't control that message. You can
Yeah.
guide the message by providing the information you want to provide, but the end product you are not in control of.
Yeah. See, I like that how you say that it's earned. No, no. Can you hear her? Or is my
No, I
microphone?
can't. I can't.
Oh, good. So my microphone's working really well then.
Yeah, okay.
It's
But we love puppies. Bring her
yes.
on.
She's barking at me. Come here.
Come on.
She always wants to
Oh,
play.
that I
Um,
heard.
yeah, did you? But what I was gonna say is you say like that it's earned, and I love that because there is also an element of social proof then built in there because it's not like, oh, I just paid for this ad space and here I am, look at me, look at me. It's no, someone had to think I was good enough to be in this spot. And so there's that automatic a higher trust, a higher yeah, just level of social proof there, I think too.
Yeah, what I call third party endorsement, right? A
Yeah.
media outlet thought enough of what you were doing and thought it was important enough that their audience knows what you're doing that they
Mhm.
decided to report it, right?
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I practice and that I urge clients to remember is that when you're pitching a reporter, you're not talking to them, you're talking to their audience. You're
Mm.
trying to strike a
Yeah.
chord in the audience that they serve.
Right.
And so you need to pitch your story or position your story through that filter. Why is this important to the audience that this publication talks to?
Mm.
And if you can thread that needle, you'll be more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, it goes back to marketing as well. You're not marketing, they're a business. Whoever you're pitching to is a business who has an audience to serve, right? So
Mhm.
it makes perfect sense. But some people might not think of it that way.
Oh yeah,
They
I
might
mean
think it's
sometimes
yeah.
people and people will frequently, sit in front of me. I wish I had a dollar for every time someone said, "I need to be in the New York Times. I want to be on CNN." Fill in your outlet, whatever that is. And my very first question after that statement is why?
Yeah.
Why do you feel you need to be there? If your audience is there, if the audience you're trying to connect with is there, fine. That aspiration makes sense and we'll work on a program that gets you there. But if it's not, it's just about ego.
Yeah.
And if you chase ego, you're never going to have results in a media relations, a public relations campaign. You're simply going to be spinning your wheels. You'll get a lot of great hits. You'll get that story in the New York Times, you'll cut it out, you'll frame it, you'll put it on your wall. And 6 months
Hmm.
later, you'll say, why isn't my cash register ringing? And I'm going to say, because that's not where your audience is,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
I
Got to remember.
yes, I that's very similar in marketing as well, right? It's not about us, it's about them. And I just saw a video of someone talking about this where they were talking about an ad, and it was an ad, a full page ad in a publication for I think like a local, I don't know, maybe like a local doctor's office or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. But all it was all about them. Here's the awards we won. Here's,
Oh,
this and that. It said nothing about how we can help you, what we do, what we specialize in. It was all about their awards. And the person, exactly what you said, it was about ego. This ad wasn't for their audience. It wasn't to get, to entice their, potential patients. It was, look at us, we're great. And
very inward
people
looking, right?
and people do not respond to that anymore. It's because I think we've been so over the years, so conditioned with so much being thrown at us, so much media, so much advertising, so much, we're the greatest, we're the best, things have become much more transparent now, especially with social media. And we want to connect on a deeper level in a way, but we also want to ensure that we can trust it and that it's going to benefit us.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the whole key is providing benefit, providing value to the audience that's consuming the news,
Yeah.
and connecting with them on a very human level.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that reporters take into account. Is this providing value to our readers, to our audience, and what keeps them coming back? Because there is a business model,
Yeah,
of
exactly.
buying a newspaper or buying a subscription or listening to a radio station that can then, the ad department can go and prove X number of people listen to our radio station. They can go sell more ads, and or
Right.
they can sell ads that, have higher prices. There is a metric value to that. But the core of it, like you said, the core of it is value to the audience. If
Yeah.
there's value to the audience, that will take you the furthest you can go.
Now, with that in mind, now we say about PR being earned media, right? So what is it that you have to have in place before you even try to even start pitching? Because I'm guessing you can't just wake up one day and be like, I want to be in the New York Times. I mean, there has to be some backstory there. There has to be something to build off of, right?
Yeah, for sure. A ton of things that I could get into. I think where I start most with new clients, in terms of whether it's onboarding or just getting started, is we sit down, in an hour brainstorming session. And this happens in the, in the RFP process, or in the, getting to know you and putting in a proposal process, is understanding what they do, breaking down their DNA, and looking for the stories that we think will make sense for them to tell.
Mm.
Things that advance their mission, things that articulate their work, things that talk about the people who work at the organization. Again, coming back to the value they provide to their community, the people that they serve, the audiences that they serve. Finding those things are the needles in the haystack that get you the media coverage that you desire. Also, I think you have to uncover the philosophy, the ethos, the thought process behind, who they are, what they do, why they get out of bed in the morning.
Mm.
If you can't uncover that, you're going to have a much harder time placing stories. There are other types of stories where they're just like business deals, like we bought a thing, we sold a thing, all that kind of stuff. And that's
Mhm.
fine. Those typically fall into the category of press releases, and
Okay.
press releases are still valid. We can still put them out, but they're one-day wonders, right? They hit, their news, they're gone. It's the story, it's the feature story pitches. It's the things you read in the front end of the paper, right? The things that make you stop. What my friend Peter Shankman, refers to as thumb-stopping content on social media, right? What makes you
Mhm.
stop in your tracks and watch that TV report on the nightly news, or read that story in the newspaper? It's those features, and those are what we refer to as pitches, right? Those are story pitches,
Oh,
and where
yeah.
we develop a story for a client about them, or a thing that they did, a program that they have, a person who did something amazing. We pitch that to a reporter, and they go and write or report a story about it. That gets you the more real estate, right? The news
Yeah.
releases get you the little tiny blurb on the business page, right? Nothing against the business page, but the
Yeah.
little tiny blurb here or there. It's the feature pitches that really talk to the who you are and what you do, that gets you the better coverage.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And does any does anything come into play there in terms of like looking at maybe what someone is already doing? And I'm sure this would depend on what the story is, what the pitch is. But let's say, for a brand or a business or something like that, are they looking at what kind of footprint they're already making on their own in terms of, what's their following like, what's their audience? Because maybe a publication might think, and I could be wrong here, maybe a publication might think, well, their audience will then come to us in a way. Like, do they have to have any kind of, I guess, what is the word I'm looking for? Uh, Personal brand equity, so to speak, on their end.
For the publication.
Yeah, like, are they looking at that stuff? Are they looking at, what have you done before? What have you
That.
what's your
Oh,
following?
you've hit on something that I talk about all the time, right? And let's
Okay,
go back
yeah.
to the we want to be in the New York Times example, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What I typically will say to now, there's nothing wrong with shooting for the New York Times right away. And certainly my answer is usually, when you do something worthy of being in the New York Times, the New York Times will call you. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But we can pitch them, obviously. But What I like to practice is the walk-up method or the ladder method, right? Before you go shooting for a huge outlet, for coverage in a huge outlet, you should get coverage in your backyard. You should get coverage with the outlets that should be covering you. And that may be your local hometown newspaper. It may be the small radio station that's in your market. It may be like your local blog or website. Patch has made a comeback, for example, right? Patch was really hot. The AOL company was really hot
Wow.
several decades ago, kind of fell on hard times, is now back, right? I get coverage in Patch all the time for my clients, because they cover them, because they're local, because they're talking about local stories. So absolutely be in those places that are supposed to be covering you. That also includes things like industry trade publications, right? Whatever industry you're in, you should be servicing information out to those, because those are your peers.
Yeah.
Those are the people who are also doing or working in the spaces that you're working in. So you should get the coverage in the places that you're supposed to be getting coverage in, and then aspire your way up the ladder to getting coverage in larger and larger outlets. And here's why you do that is because, let's take the New York Times example again. If you pitch a story to the New York Times, unless it's like news they can't ignore and they
Mhm.
absolutely have to cover it for obvious reasons, they're going to say, all right, and they're going to Google. What are they going to come up with? They're either going to come up
Yeah.
with nothing because you haven't been covered before, or they're
Yeah.
going to come up with all that smaller market coverage. And if they come up with that smaller market coverage, they say, oh, this person is legit. They've got a track record. They've done some things. Here's what they've done over the last couple of years. Great. I will cover them. I will look into this story and see if I want to pursue it. So
Yeah.
that's why that ladder method or that walk-up method works so good. Find get the coverage you're supposed to be getting while you aspire to getting the rest of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think that's really too a lot where marketing and PR overlap because I feel like in the beginning you're going to have to be marketing yourself in order to even get to that point. Like you said, if someone goes and Googles you, what are they going to find? Right? So being able to have, even if it's your like you said, smaller publications, or even your website, or even a social following that's significant, or whatever that may be, just something that shows that you are in front of the public already in a way. Yeah, I think yeah,
And that's why I
that's,
urge people to have a public relations program in effect all the time in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's not working with an outside consultant like me. Maybe it's just someone in your communications office who can be putting out some press releases or putting things on your website or whatever.
yeah,
But you've got to have some kind of outbound, proactive, positive public relations plan in place all the time, because um, you need to ask yourself, what do you want your customers to know about you 5 years from now?
mm,
And if 5 years
yeah,
from now they Google you, right? And they look back over the
yeah,
news coverage and they don't find any because you didn't have a PR program in place, you run the risk of losing that customer or losing that deal.
yeah.
You've got to be thinking in that sort of long term. And that's what PR does too, is it plays a very long game with your
Okay.
reputation, your brand, your visibility. And it enhances all that in an aggregate way over time.
Yeah, that's a really good point because every time that we Google something, we are constantly comparing. We are shopping. We are looking to see, right? If you're no matter what it is, no matter what you're looking for, you're going to look for the one that has the most credentials. And what is that? That's like you said, that's what's popping up in Google. Where have you been featured? Who's talking about you? You know? And like you said, starting now, even if you're not doing it, starting now. And that could be something as small, even for small businesses, something as small as getting featured on somebody else's blog, getting featured on, like you said, the smaller publications, and then work your way up. I think that's brilliant. And how people might be intimidated by that, maybe. So, what would you say to people who don't know where to start with that? What first steps could they take?
Sure, great question. So let's assume you don't have the budget or whatever to hire someone like me, right?
Hmm.
Um, and let's say you have an internal communications person, or let's say you're one person shop, right? You probably write some kind of content to promote your business, right? You maybe have a blog, maybe you have a newsletter, you have something, right? Take that content and adjust it slightly and turn it into a press release with a headline and a dateline and some information in it. And if you don't know how to write a press release, just Google, how do I write a press release? It's, not rocket science.
Right.
Be clear and concise with the writing, which is really important because reporters, reading it on the first take, they need to decipher it and understand it right away and understand they're getting 500 of those releases every day,
Mm,
depending on, what
yeah.
market they're working in. So make it clear and concise and right to the point. And send it to your local paper, send it to your local radio station, send it to the local TV station. Throw it out there, because here's the thing is that they may not write it they may write it the first time. That's great. You may get a story out of it. That's terrific. And there are some smaller markets, especially on their website, where they need so much content that sometimes if a press release comes to them that is legitimate and they can call up and verify that it's legit, and great, they'll almost copy and paste and put it on their website. That's terrific. You've done
Yeah.
it, right? It gets more complicated again as you walk up the ladder.
Right.
But start there. Start just turning some of the content that you've created to promote your business into something that has news value for your local market, for your customers, and for the audience that goes to the hometown paper or the hometown TV or radio station. And give that to them and see if that hits. Offer to do an interview, right? TV and radio need talking people.
Yeah.
They can't just read words on the screen. And I always service video to local TV stations whenever I put out a story. If they can't come and cover my story and shoot the video themselves, I will shoot it myself and I will send it to them so that they,
Nice.
unbranded, so that they can use it. It turns what we call a reader story, which is just a press release or some kind of written content, into a TV story, because now they have some video to run underneath it.
Okay.
But just push it out there. Start. The whole thing is start. Do something. Take that first step, and then as you get better at it or progress, it can get more complicated or get more involved, and you'll get better at it too.
Yeah, that is a really good tip and really attainable, I think. I think that's very much doable for anybody. That's
Yep.
awesome. That's a really good tip.
It's
Thanks
got to
for
be
sharing
part
that.
of your promotion, right? I mean,
Yeah.
under the big umbrella of marketing, advertising, public relations, media relations, government community relations, it's all part of
Yeah.
marketing your business.
Yeah, one big system. Yeah. So thank you for sharing all of that information. And I do have one last question for you is, so we talked about in the beginning of how you know, thought you were going to go on a different path and you ended up on this one. So what was it about that? Where did you, I guess, find, because I feel like anyone who starts their own business, there's got to be some type of passion there to keep them going, keep the drive going, right? So what was it for you? What is it about public relations for you that I guess gives you that fuel?
In a word, storytelling. I think I've
Yeah.
always been a storyteller. I mean, even going back to, grade school, I used to love creative writing.
Yeah.
And I used to love telling stories to people. And that's what I did when I was a radio reporter. And that's what I do now. I tell people stories. I just tell them in different ways and for different purposes.
Yeah.
Storytelling is really fun for me. Articulating an idea and helping people understand why it's important or why it's valuable
Mhm.
is a lot of fun for me. And that's
Yeah.
why I love, doing podcast interviews, and why I host my own podcast, and, why I do social media, why I do all that stuff. I'm a storyteller.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I can see that. I can see that for sure. And you're very good at it.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. And I think this was really helpful. I think people will have a lot of good takeaways from this. So, again, thank you so much, Jody Fisher. And I will, of course, have all of your information linked so people can find you and get in touch with you, follow you, and, learn more from you. So, thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you.